All right. So the left side of it, of this architecture, would be our WebDriver factories, right? Uh, Everybody online? Is everyone mute? Okay, Mira. Okay, that's fine. So that's our driver factory, which we are very common to. What is the purpose of driver factory? Before some sort of a setup, right? We do like a setup before our test and so forth, right? And we also do tear down. We initialize our driver. Guys, this is what you have to explain at your interview. Someone's going to say, hey, walk me through your framework. You have to explain it because they don't understand what driver factory is. This is something that I came up with the name, right? So you have to explain it. They are going to have something similar, right? But when you explain it, they know that, okay, you know what you're talking about. So I'm just going to turn this up a little bit. It's not going through.
Yeah, it's not. So we can restart the.
Is it good now? All right. So going back to our, so the left side, this is kind of the architecture, kind of like a little bit of a backbone of your framework. But we're going to keep adding new classes and objects to our framework, right? So the driver factory, pretty much we use it to initialize our driver. So we have a central, only single instance of initialization, right? You don't want to initialize WebDriver every different places, right? That's not cool. So, and then you have your before class and after class, things that you want to do before your test and after your test. Make sense, right? And then these are your tests. So let's say this is verify invalid login, right? And then you have, we could just, call it login. This is your gender, right? This is your gender test, and this is your login test. So the login one that we've done it together, and then you guys did the classwork for gender. So these are two different classes. So tomorrow, if you have another test, it'll be a sign up and so forth. Well, one thing they all have in common is that they're all derived from driver factory, because the driver factory has to initialize few things before and after, right? So you see, it doesn't matter how many tests you write, you have one central location of storing all of those, before and after action. But the test, it makes sense for tests to be individual because that's the whole purpose of the test. They should not be repeating. Gender, there's a different purpose on this test compared to the one you have here. There might be another one where you post on Facebook or you read comments or whatnot, right? All of those different things. Now, let's move on to the left side, right side of our architecture, right? So we'll call it something like base page. What this base page does is this is where we store all of our actions. Right now, the way we are handling our actions, such as click, clear, send keys, drop down, right? These are common functions that we perform on a web page, right? And the way we are doing it, we're directly using it through Selenium. What we have to do is we have to build a wrapper within our code base, right? So that we can do other things. So let's say when you try to click on element and you can't find it, it should maybe take a screenshot, or it should maybe send an email to someone, right? Or whatever may be the case. So you want to take some logs. You can't do that the way you're doing it. The way we are writing our code now, it's not scalable, so to speak. It's pretty immature, right? So we have to really write this in a very efficient way that we have a one central location. So let's say you want to change something about click on your entire framework, you can just do it in one place. And let's say you use click on thousands of places, it doesn't matter because you made a change in only one location, right? But the way we are doing now, we kind of just getting everything, from Selenium and we're performing it. That's not how we can do that. So that's all of our actions. We're going to be storing it here, okay? So the click, clear, send keys, drop down, drag and drop, all of those stuff, we're going to have a custom function for it. And you're going to build these custom functions. So if you really think about it, we really use very minimum of Selenium at that point because your framework, the tool that we are building, we're building a software at this point, right? This is the software that you'll be using to automate manual test cases, all right? But then you have to have something called page objects. So when we dealt with 3 pages so far, actually maybe 4, but let's just say 3, right? Landing page, invalid login page, and then a messenger page, right? Those are the 3 pages. We have to keep track of these elements, right? This web elements. So for instance, so far, what did we do on landing page? We have 4 elements that we dealt with on landing page, right? Or maybe 5 actually, maybe 6, right? Because you have male and female, right? So, but you see, those 6 elements will be part of landing page, right? As of today. Tomorrow, let's say we add a new functionality like a sign up, like first name, last name. So you're going to be adding them on a landing page, just the way they did it on the front end. We have to do the same thing on the automation side of things. So for each page, there will be a class for it. Does that make sense? So for landing page, there will be a landing.class, right? And then if there was a invalid login page, there should be a login class for it. If a messenger page, and all of the locators that resides within those pages has to belong to your sub pages, on your Java pages as well. So that's how we're going to be using them. So let's say login page, and then you have a messenger page, right? So these are your pages, these are your tests, this is your common functionality that all the pages share. So what do you do on the pages, right? Think about it. You either click, you either enter some data, you do a drag and drop, you read something, right? Get text, so you're able to read something. What if we abstract all of those things here? Because these are common for all pages. Does that make sense? So when we do that, we can pretty much use this here on all of those pages. And what does your test case requires? Well, sometimes it may require a function from a landing page and a messenger page. There may be another scenario where it may require something from a login page and a landing page. It could be a combination of so many different things. So they will be independent, right? But they're all going to be derived from something called base page. And same thing with all your tests is going to be independent, but they're also derived from your driver factory. So if you think it that way, we can go somewhere with this framework, right? So, but when you go into an interview, and today's a very early stage, and we're kind of just getting started, the only way you learn these things is by keep writing test cases, right? As you keep automating test scenarios, this is going to become fluent for you because it's going to grow. There's going to be more stuff. Like tomorrow, we're going to be adding mobile here. Another day, we might add another class called database connection, right? So there's so many things that's going to be added, but it's scalable. We can keep adding stuff to it as long as it makes sense, all right? All right, so now we kind of know about the left side of it. Let's start building out the right side of this framework, right? So we have our driver factory. We have our verify invalid login. So this is the one we're going to do together. But for homework, you're going to take the gender test case and convert it within your framework, right? You're going to take the messenger test cases and convert it within your framework. If the test works or not, it doesn't matter for me, right? That's not the idea here to deal with locators. That's not the purpose of today's class. To make sure you understand this framework from day one so we don't struggle as we move forward, right? So you want to spend maybe a day or two to really understand what am I doing, and the only way you can do it is to write test on it, right? So, very first thing I want to do is create something called base page. So far, we have performed 3 type of actions, right? What are those? Actions, send keys, click, get text, right? We've done get text is another one, right? So those 3. So we have to create a base actions for those that everyone can use, right? So we'll say but what is one thing that is different about this? Let's say you want to click on something, but what do you click on? You click on a web element. So button is it could be button, it could be radio button, it could be checkbox, so many different things. But you perform an action on a web element, right? So you might say, well, Mohammed, you could just do this. What if you web element becomes your data type, right? Right? So let's try with this, right? And then we could say driver factory dot get driver dot find element, and then so let's assume we do this right now for that sake, right? And then click. But the problem with element, right? So if you do by dot id, right? So the problem with the element that we have, right? Now you have to have a bunch of different methods, one for ID, one for partial link, one for link, right? One for XPath, one for CSS. So that becomes a lot of work, right? But what if we did this? What if we made the entire by a parameter, right? So instead of, you see the by data type? So we're going to be using something called by data type and passing that as an element, right? And all you have to say is that, okay, by.id and that element value, right? So every time, because now you can use XPath, you can use ID, like 8 different ways we can locate element. You can dump any of those and it should pretty much work for you, right? So now you have your custom click on method for you to use, right? So let's create one more. Because going back to this is the part that keeps changing. What's inside of a find element. Does that make sense? This is the part that's always going to change because you're going to click on sometime or submit another time, right? But it doesn't matter, right? So every page you're going to perform action on a different type of elements. So therefore, whatever part that kind of changes, that becomes a parameter. It's kind of a rule of thumb, right? So when you're coding, if you see a value that is continuing to change, well, that's the part we need to make a parameter because that's going to be different every time, all right? So in our case, this by object is going to be different every time, right? Because there's going to be a point we're going to be clicking on submit. There's going to be another point we're going to be clicking on email or whatnot, right? So that's the part. Therefore, we are making this a dynamic value. It's going to be a parameter, right? So now, let's create another one called, we can just call a set value, right? In this case, we need 2 values that needs to be a parameter, right? Why is it 2 value? One is the locator for the field. Another one is the text that you're going to be inserting, right? Because text is also going to be dynamic. The text that you're going to be sending on email field is going to be different than password field or another field, another text field or first name. So therefore, we're going to say whatever that value is. And the reason I can access driver factory.getDriver is because why? Right? Because this is a static, this is a class data. I should be able to get driver any part of my framework at any point, right? So that's the reason I created this static last week, right? Because I want to be able to access this because you're really not inheriting driver factory here because it doesn't make sense to inherit driver factory in this stage, right? Because these are just standalone functions that this is not really a test. So I don't need before class and after class. And before class will instantiate my driver, but then I can use the static method to kind of grab it from here, right? Whatever the element is, and then set values. You see, you're not hard coding anything, right? Because that's going to be different for a different element. The very last one that we have to do is public, and this one actually returns a value, right? Get tags from element. And then we can just say return driver factory dot get driver dot find element.